Welcome, everyone, and thank you very much for coming. Let me first say that the economic growth of the 3Cs region over the past couple of decades has been one of the greatest success stories in the recent European history. The 10 CEE countries have grown over the course of the past 15 years their per capita GDP by more than 120%. Now, in 1990, a country like Estonia had a GDP per capita that was equivalent to the GDP per capita of Papua New Guinea. Today, Estonia is a country that has more unicorns per capita than any other place in the world. Poland, on the other hand, hosts enormous R&D centers of our best tech companies. Ukraine, on the other hand, has developed itself into a leader in GovTech and defense technologies. And my humble country, Slovenia, for example, hosts the UNESCO's AI Center. So we've gone a very, very long way. And today, I'm proud to say that our region boasts more than 30 unicorns. Now, the digital revolution, as we all know, has been the key, or let's say one of the key drivers of this economic miracle. Our societies have been quick to adopt new technologies and see whatever new trend is coming as an opportunity rather than a risk. Our citizens have been early adopters when it comes to all kinds of new technologies, from e-banking all the way to ride-sharing. Our entrepreneurs have been quick to emerge on the global tech stage with their services as well as new business models. And our governments have played an important part as well by promoting pro-digital and pro-innovation public policies. Today, we are going to discuss how to build on this solid foundation to create a digital region of the future, a region of champions. I'm delighted to be joined by excellent, or let's say one of the key young leaders of this region's digital transformation, starting with Ms. Rita Balogh, who's the Europe lead in Google's international government affairs teams. We have Mr. Martin Wezowski, who's a chief futurist at SAP, and Mr. Wiktor Schmidt, who's an executive chairman of Netguru. Now, we've all heard of Google, we've all heard of SAP, but Wiktor, let me ask you first, what does your company do? Because I think it's one of the most exciting companies to ever come from our region.
Thank you, that's so kind, and thank you for the invitation. Yeah, so we focus on actually the implementation of a lot of the things that we'll be talking about today. So we work with corporates and startups and scale-ups, and we help them build digital products. And I would say probably half of the conversations we have with our clients today are starting with AI. And they don't always end with AI, prototype or product, but definitely there's a huge interest in this space, and that's what we focus on with our clients.
Thank you, Wiktor, and congratulations. Now let's start with an open-ended question, and I would like to ask each of the panelists, how do you envision the 3Cs region of the future, or let's say the digital Central and Eastern Europe, in 10, 15, perhaps 20 years? And let's start with you, Rita.
Happy to. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. From a Google perspective, the Central European region is a very, very exciting one. I think one of the most impressive statistics, you quoted 120%. I think for Poland, the growth rate was 170% or something along those lines for the past 25 years. And from the statistics that I've seen, digital, as you mentioned, is a huge driver of this growth. And we're here in Davos, everybody's talking about AI, so you are not going to be surprised that I'm also just want to pause of how much more potential there is if we accelerate the AI-driven digital transformation. And we often think about AI as chatbot. AI is so much more than just a chatbot. It's a fundamental technological, scientific breakthrough and innovation. Sundar, our CEO, often says AI is akin to magic, and it's going to be similar to what we've seen when the internet came about. And so we are already seeing and going to see even more innovation and breakthroughs in the medical space. So, for example, Google DeepMind was the one inventing AlphaFold, and it's technology to help us understand how proteins are folding, which may sound, very technical, but or geeky, but it's super important when you start thinking about personalized medicine. We are also Google DeepMind is also thinking about how can we categorize and better understand what changes in your body are malignant or beneficial, and we're working really closely with the medical community on that. There are breakthroughs in cybersecurity, which I think in this region and the free seas, it's one of a priority, which is really going to revolutionize how we think about cyber defense. So already today, the cyber landscape is very challenging. We see like 38% of growth year on year in cyber attacks. We also see in the context of the war in Ukraine, we published a study just to look at what happened in the first year of the war, and we have seen a 300% increase of attacks and cyber attacks on NATO countries, not even just on Ukraine, which is a 250% increase. So the geopolitical context, how it translates into the cyber environment, particularly relevant for the Central European region in the current context. AI going to help us deal with this. AI going to help us manage the complexity. It already does. But AI also going to democratize access to cyber defense tools. For example, one of our cloud tools, which we call SecLM, allows you to talk to the computer, and you don't need to talk in code. You can have a conversation talking about, your cybersecurity strategy, for example. So huge amount of opportunities of AI in general, and I think the Central European region and the Free Sea region in general is very, very well placed.
Thank you, Rita. This sounds great, and let me express my deepest gratitude to you and Google for standing by this region through thick and thin. You've been one of the first and major investors in our region, and you've been committed to Ukraine from the day Russia began its aggression. Now, Martin, as chief futurist, I believe you're an expert in future and predicting the future. So give us your hint of how the future of this digital region will look like in a couple of years' time. Will it be powered by AI?
Yes, and one caveat there, or disclaimer, I do not predict the future. So that's I leave that for
we won't invite you
other
again.
Professions. But there is a fantastic outlook here. Yes, there will be a lot of AI driven, a little bit to what you said. AI is an enabler. It's just a mechanical tool there. But what we have in Europe, looking at, say, between China and the US, to make it simple, is a form of stability that we look for. It's not always advantageous for us. We take it too easy, don't rock the boat, and so on. Let's see how it happens. I spent 27 years in Sweden, okay? And I'm a Polish guy, and Sweden is a little bit the consensus country, the social democracy. However, looking, for example, at Estonia with e-residency, I looked forward to a digital citizenship that is global and coming out of Europe as a platform. Together with enormous amount of large language models conveying on a platform that could be, I don't know, call it Spotify for LLMs, and connecting all these new companies coming up to serve citizens. Because with all the AI acts coming out, all the warnings, this could go bad, we talked about it a little bit before, I think we need to capture opportunities. And the only way to do it is through public consensus that this might be good. And the public consensus won't come from very rich companies coming in and saying, this is how we do it, we do business AI. That's a given, people expect that. But it comes from citizens understanding that this is for me. I am in charge, I'm the author, the AI augments me, makes me, amplifies what I can do as a citizen in this country, in this region, and as a global citizen, I can connect. So this augmentation, the first A of the future, of each one of us, a personal AI, we talked about it a lot during the last years, and the second A, autonomy. So not only automation of our businesses, business AI will be a very strong vertical, but an autonomy of networks of people and business makers, startups and so on, where they can act freely but safely, securely through the new tools. You don't have to compare your bullet point list. Does it match that? Is this compliant? But this will be amplified for you, so you can go to creative business rather than administrated. It's the future. So these kind of trust, truth, automation that becomes autonomy and augmentation of citizens, each one of us, might be a future to look forward to.
Excellent. Thank you very much. AI at its best is something that empowers all of us. Now, Wiktor, as an up-and-coming tech entrepreneur, you're building the future of the region. So how can we seize the opportunities given by AI as well as other digital technologies?
Yeah, I think maybe from a little bit of a different perspective, I think the future I see is the future where you build on our core strength, which I think is relatively well known. I would say even globally that the really core deep tech talent that we have in the region, and we see something that's I'm a little bit biased towards, but we see this, and one of the reasons I think we were able to be successful was that a lot of our clients look at the region and say, okay, this is a place where there's a lot of good minds and very smart people who think about technology and software and engineering. And OpenAI, like one of the co-founders is Polish. I think half of the founding engineering team is Polish as well, and I think people from the region as well. That it's really a strong foundation that we can build on. But at the same time, I think we need to be really going forward and building on top of this foundation and build this. I think we are somewhere where we built the first story of this building, and we need to continue to build this building up for it to become a skyscraper where we have very good product talent, very good sales, marketing teams, and business obviously teams that can continue to build up the products and the innovations that we want to see coming from the region. And I'm super excited about this. I think maybe 5 years ago I would not be able to say that, but now I'm really excited about the next couple of years in the region, how especially in tech, especially also with this context of AI, what can be built and what can come out of this region, and the next, what you said, 30, another 30 or 300 unicorns coming out of the region.
If I may jump on that just a second, what you said. We have engineers in the region, in Poland, in Hungary, and many other places where they're actually working on AI for our cloud product, and other different aspects. So just second that there is enormous talent in the region, and we also have partnerships with universities, etc. So just to emphasize the point there.
Absolutely. Now, Wiktor, let's stay on the talent side for a little bit more. Now, we've been an engine of amazing talent for many, many years. But how do we make sure to retain that talent? To have, companies like OpenAI being founded out of Poznan rather than some other place in the Silicon Valley. So how do we keep this talent and make sure it ignites opportunities in our region?
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, I don't think this is the right question, honestly. I think I'm not super worried about people going somewhere, learning and improving and actually sometimes maybe co-founding companies outside of Poland, as long as, or the region, as long as they somehow contribute back to the community. And we see this happening. Like one of the co-founders of Snowflake, the biggest tech IPO in the Valley, I think ever. He's a Polish guy. He left Poland, I think, for his studies, and now he's contributing. He's investing in the ecosystem, both as an angel investor, investing in funds and being active in some organizations. So I think this we can leverage this, even though sometimes we think about, okay, how can we defend ourselves from people leaving? I don't think this is the right question. I think the right question is how can we empower those folks and also then help them stay connected to the region and give back whatever they've learned and whatever they've accomplished.
I think that's absolutely true, and thank you for highlighting this point. Now, we can't discuss AI without mentioning the AI Act, one of the hottest topics these days, and what it brings for companies that are very large, companies that are large, and companies that will become large. How do you perceive it? What do you think are the core benefits, and how can the region make the most of it? Rita, perhaps let's start with you.
Happy to. I think our CEO was probably the first who came out publicly saying AI is too important not to regulate. but also too important not to regulate well. So we have been supportive of the EU AI Act as it was published. It follows a risk-based approach, focuses on the end use cases, which we believe is the right way approach. I mean, regulating AI is like regulating mathematics, so it's very broad, it's everywhere. But identifying use cases which are potentially high risk is something that we are supporting. The negotiations are still ongoing, and we understand there was a political agreement in December. I don't have insight of what the details are of those agreement. I believe we're still waiting for the text potentially. And with any legislation, the devil is in the details. So we continue to follow that very closely. But there's also international development in this area. For example, the G7 just published through the Hiroshima process an international code of conduct for AI. We have been among the first ones to say we're going to support that code. I understand the European Commission was very, very involved in negotiating that code. So it's also going to be interesting of what's going to be the interplay between the European rules and the international rules. There are also other developments in the UN, etc. So there's a lot of movement in this space. We believe this is going to be important to put down rules for everybody. But we also believe it's going to be important to get the details right.
Absolutely, I think that's a great point. Martin?
Yes.
Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, the risk-based approach, it comes again. I'm, looking at the future, you need to be positive. There's no other way to make progress. As I said actually here yesterday, we didn't go to the moon by being like, nah, it maybe happens. We went there because we were naively positive about it in this decade, you remember. I think maybe this is the new moonshot or slingshot or whatever you want to call it. We need to be extremely positive, and our citizens in the region needs to know that. And I think they will know how we implement the AI Act to the citizens by effect. So it's not only transparency in data and so on and protection from that data usage, it's transparency in actions. What do we want to do? Where do we invest our money as government organizations and businesses to leverage your life? I could imagine, again, from a futurist perspective, a life and workflow app for each citizen that is absolutely protected on the device, on the edge AI that might appear very soon, very effectively on some devices, where we can have vocational training, when we can have at-work training that is immediately enabling you to do something else in a protected way. And coming to talent there, that develops talent and usage of these new technologies, rather than, as you said, oh, they will get out of here. No, you're protected here, you can develop, you can grow as a company, as a startup, but also as a big business with many citizens within your company that are enabled to do that in a transparent way. So extreme positive outlook with a social growth as a major effect of this AI Act. Then people might think, no, the Act is not here to police us. It's here to grow the social enablement of technology, digital growth in Europe.
Thank you so much. I must say that it feels incredibly refreshing to be finally at a panel where people talk positively about AI and that it won't bring the end of the world.
I'm not saying that there are dangers. I'm just saying that the Europe's stable culture and this region's culture of grabbing opportunities,
exactly.
Combine those and we have a bomb.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, Wiktor, what does the AI Act mean for startups and smaller companies? Did we get the balance between innovation and regulation right?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to judge at this stage. I think for smaller companies, definitely. I mean, a lot of people say, large corporates, they're all, against regulation. They're trying to, weasel their way around, and I don't think that's really the right approach. I think it's really the smaller players who are the most concerned about over-regulating the industry, because the large players, and we've seen this, in privacy in EU, like large players are able to navigate. They have legal teams, they have resources to be able to find the best way for them to move forward, and the smaller players are not really in a position to do that. So the way to kind of kill innovation is to definitely to over-regulate. I think what we should be focusing on really is the really core kind of use cases where we definitely see risks. So definitely misinformation, cyber is another area where we see AI being a possible huge threat to society, and that's where we should probably have some kind of intervention. But I would, coming from hopefully speaking a little bit for the smaller innovators, I think we need as much space to be able to innovate as possible and as safe for the society. But we'll see how this particular act will play out. But that's kind of I think what a lot of small players are thinking.
Now, one of the core mechanisms for spurring innovation within the AI is supposed to be the sandbox system instituted by the AI Act, which means that innovators will be able to play with high-risk AI systems and develop them within, I would say, a safe environment, so to speak. Now, can our region become a leader in the sandboxes? Can we, be the first ones or the most proactive ones in establishing this kind of sandboxes so that we take the initiative when it comes to developing important but higher risk AI applications?
Well, I think yes, but or yes and. I think if you think also like in the context of the region, I think the hacker culture that we have, and you've mentioned Estonia, you've mentioned obviously for sure Poland. From my experience, hackers are excited about doing things on the edge of whatever, like law, appropriateness, or things that are somewhere there in the kind of gray zone. So I think, and a lot of innovation actually happens there, and we have to again, like, you have to be careful. The whole conversation about Facebook talking about move fast and break things. Now they're thinking maybe that's that's not exactly what should be doing now at this stage. But like very early on, this kind of a mindset of hacking or maybe being a little bit on the edge of innovation, I think it's something that we need to be careful not to lose by sandboxing and kind of sterilizing everything. So I would say yes, but with this kind of and or but at the end.
I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that is exactly what I'm thinking. Sandboxing doesn't mean to check one effect of one feature of what you're doing and see how that pushes the legislation. For example, that will be a nice one. I think being Europe, we should connect all these e-residents, if you wish, say a company, a startup. They have a great idea. With 3 other countries and 15 other startups, combine their efforts in a safe, secure way. Through this, what do you guys do? Do you have a description? Do I need to connect to you in the right way? What's the compliance legislation? That's not the real job. The real job is actually to connect and test it in a sandbox. And I think these sandboxes should be spread across topics, features, problems we need to solve, opportunities we grab, rather than regions, countries, or companies themselves. We need to dissolve these boundaries to start working together in a specific programs that are maybe sanctions through the AI Act, but they are also enablers for sandboxes for problem solving rather than growth for specific agents, like a company like SAP or a startup, but together with others. And this is what I mean by autonomy. You can go to business directly rather than try to figure out if that business would be safe. And that is, for me, the power of this digital idea and connection between the countries in an autonomous connection. So you don't have to think about the legislation that's embedded in how we connect, but you need to think about if that innovation we provide is, legislatively correct. And that maybe is an opportunity to sandbox around topics and opportunities.
I think that's an excellent point. You can't develop sophisticated solutions in a vacuum. There needs to be a broader environment of interactions. Now, going a step back to digital skills. Now, we were talking about this region being incredibly good at creating top talent. But in the end, we need to make sure that AI is as inclusive as possible, that as many citizens as possible understand the systems and are able to use them to their benefit. But on the other hand, we see the European statistics that paint a very bleak picture about Central and Eastern Europe. Digital skills across our populations are not even close to the European average. Now, Google has been working a lot in this area, and Rita, tell us what you've been doing, and I'll ask a similar question to you guys as well.
Yeah, and I think it's not just people, but also businesses. And I've seen statistics where in the entire Europe, there's only 8% of the SMEs who are using AI today. There are only about a third of SMEs who are using cloud-based solutions today. So I think there's still way to go to help not just the big companies to kind of accelerate their digital transformation, but also continue with what we've seen with COVID, where more and more smaller businesses are also relying on technology. And cloud is a very interesting one because that's a great, fast way to get access to the state-of-the-art, latest and the greatest technological innovation. So we have multiple different programs. We're trying to help the enterprise community to gain the skills. We're hoping that many of our cloud products are going to help them also stay on top of the digital evolution. But we also have a program called Grow with Google, which have the whole idea behind is you don't need to have 5 years of university. And I say it from the perspective of someone who spent many, many years in different universities around the world. But the idea of the Grow with Google program is you can get certifications on cybersecurity and on other core skills that you need in about 6 months' time, and that's job ready. That's going to get you jobs as well. And we increasingly integrate AI, not just having a standalone AI kind of certificate, but integrating AI in the different certificates that we're providing. And we're hoping that this is going to help many people around the region to get the skills that they need.
Amazing. Now, if we go to either of you, how are you nurturing talent in-house and in your respective environments?
Well, I mean, for us, this is the core of what we do, right? Our engineers, the talent that we have, they need to be, at least a step ahead of the industry to know what's the edge of technology right now. But I really wanted to kind of point out that I was at the panel this morning where one of the panelists mentioned that kind of AI, they think about AI a little bit less as electricity, as this kind of one of those new core, very basic tools that we call almost commodities in a sense, not in a sense of like being cheap, but like in a sense that being so ubiquitous that we need to start embedding the learning and the education around it, maybe similar to electricity when, every 4 or 5 year old should probably know that you don't put a wire in the socket, that you have to kind of, teach folks from very young age, like what are the dangers, how do you use AI? I think this is what we're going to see, or hopefully going to see on every stage of the education going forward. And this is, probably large part of it is on the governments to implement, but also within organizations, we definitely need to be thinking about how every single employee, not an engineer, not always the technical folks, how do they know how to interact with AI and what it's going to mean, what are the risks and what are the considerations to keep in mind.
I think that's a great point, and we should also think about how we can bring this kind of advanced digital skills already to our primary and secondary schools, exactly as Estonia has done it beautifully many years ago. I don't know if you're aware of their incredible program called Programming Tiger that teaches kids already in preschool how to solve problems and do some very, very basic programming. And this is, I think, something that can inspire curiosity and later on innovation in young people's mind, and it's super precious. What about you? You're a big organization with a lot of talent.
And I guess as you maybe, and I mean, you're in your nature, we've been looking at this for quite a while. I would say a decade in some ways. So we were talking internally at SAP about the concept of my AI, very early on, or my machine learning back then, my analytical tool, where I am better at doing my job depending on my cognitive abilities. We all preferred Excel spreadsheets compared to video stories about the analytics of our financial situations. Someone is left-handed or right-handed. All those things are different for each one of us. So we try to develop our business software in such a way when it hits your consumption, your user experience, it's yours. So this is where we think internally at SAP first, and then obviously out to the world, it's important because then the workers can focus on the work. We call it the human in the center of their work, rather in the center of our systems, which is a huge difference if you think about it. We do align with the tools we are presented with, rather than tools aligning with who they meet. And yesterday we talked about the 10 billion personal AIs soon, in some decades. And I think that's one way to do it. And then spin off what you said, there is a governmental organizational role there as well. I would like to see a public business service AI / business. So when you start up, how do I go about it? A ChatGPT for being, plug and thrive rather than plug and play. Many people can plug into the business network systems and so on, and they go, what now? Will they fool us? Can we make money from this? How about a little help for that? That is safe, secure, and private, obviously, and legislatively compliant. But that kind of infrastructure of smartness, the smartest app in the world is the one that makes you smarter. And we have the technology for that now. And I'm looking forward to that.
I think that's an excellent point. And one last question before opening the floor to all of you. What would be your top recommendations or advice to the governments in the 3Cs region to make sure we continue nurturing talent, to make sure we continue attracting investments and building top-notch AI? Rita?
We were just talking about it, walking up the stairs with Mark. The 3Cs initiative has digital as one of the core components in promoting connectivity, but only less than 15% of the resources are going to actually digital. I think, the underlying infrastructure, which is, connection to the internet, going to remain really important, investing in that, investing in talent, making sure that people, companies, governments leading the way in the adoption of some of these technologies, adopt state-of-the-art technology, because the technology evolution in this space is incredibly fast. If you follow any one of our executives, every month, I would say, we come up with something new, and maybe more frequently than that. So when you think about, and then the last bit is the regulatory environment, the competitiveness is not just about if the latest technology is available, but when it is available. If you need to have big compliance effort to evaluate before you're launching products in Europe, for example, that delay in availability can have an impact in the overall competitiveness of the region. So I think, and then you asked the sandbox question before, I think another important aspect is innovation happens around the world. So how do you create a sandbox for the region in a sense where you don't need to supervise every single innovation, but kind of be a trusted partner where companies can go to you with questions and have a constant dialogue with the regulators. We have a lot of ongoing constructive relationship with regulators around Europe. But if for example, something like the sandbox you have to innovate through a supervised system, there's no resources on the planet from the regulatory side which can supervise everything, while in the meantime, Europe competes on the global stage to attract the innovation, to attract the latest product developments, the rollouts, etc. So I think a holistic approach around infrastructure, skills, state-of-the-art technology, encouraging the uptake of that, as well as thinking about the regulatory environment that really fosters competitiveness will be important.
I think, Rita, this is a great point that the EU seems to forget occasionally. We compete in a global race where we are not the leader. So this is important to note. Wiktor, what would be your top advice to the new Polish government or any government in the region?
I think look,
especially from the
when
SMEs
you think about
perspective.
those major long-term issues, I think everything always comes down to education, and we touched on this a little bit. But I would add to it maybe a little bit on top of that. That once you are able to educate folks, you then need to bring them in and get more young people in positions of power. I think this is one of the things that both US but also Europe, Poland specifically, and the region I would imagine as well has an issue with. A lot of folks in the positions of power are people who, by design, are not even able to understand the technology as the young people are today. And I think we need more of the young people in the positions of power, in different levels of government, making decisions and driving some of those things that they've learned through this education system that I think, especially in there are certain, statistics that you've mentioned that are still, worrying, but I think the education system is not that bad. And I think we can bring in some of those folks who are now quite well educated. Some of them, like as you mentioned, they leave the country. Can we give them an opportunity to join maybe on the political side, on the government side, and actually lead the changes from what they've learned in the educational system?
Excellent. We definitely need more young people in the positions of power. So which one of you two will become the next digital minister?
It's a co-chair there.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely.
Excellent.
Yes, I'd like to add to that. We've been looking at technology for so many years, developing faster, exponentially. And my passion is the human ingenuity in it. The vision is that the human ingenuity and the machine intelligence in a symbiosis. It's not a transactional relationship, it's symbiotic, emotionally empathic relationship. This is for me, I feel good with this. So that's the general direction. And then we can translate that to, for example, governmental and organizational support for diversity of tools. In Europe, we have so many languages, so many different cultures. I mean, we have them everywhere. But I would like to see LLMs supported to grow through the startup community by government investments to be diverse, very vertical, very slim LLMs, where the small and medium businesses can manage their special one-off kind of manufacturing with an LLM that doesn't exist specially for them. So they need to adapt to the tools rather than find a diverse tools for them. Second point on that diversity and the human ingenuity in the center of AI would be, let's pick women. We have 50% of the workforce that is absolutely not enabled to perform to full capabilities. And I think Europe could lead that change. The change is coming, but it's not coming fast enough. We don't have the shortage of talent. No, we have shortage of women inclusion in the talent pool. And that needs to change. AI can help, governments can help. And when it comes to messaging about what I said, be positive, governments, please. Say, we are here for you. I think the future is bright, and here's your life and work, citizen AI, they will help you. You find a job, kindergarten, or whatever, what do you call it in English? School for your children and so on. Easier, you're moving to a new town. It's a flow of things rather than you being dumped in a situation and what now? There is help to get. So direct help in your life so you can be that human in the center of your life and work with your ingenuity amplified by the AIs that government sponsors and supports with large investments. Europe could be a leader in the human growth.
I think this was a perfect inauguration speech of the new European Commission President. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now let me open the floor for your questions. I'm sure this excellent discussion sparked a lot of curiosity among you. So please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and ask a question. Not all of you at the same time, please. One by one. I see the second row being very... Ian?
Hi, I'm Ian Brzezinski, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. How do you see AI affecting positively or negatively, disruptively, or however, the upcoming elections in 2024, particularly in Europe?
Great question. Thank you, Ian.
I guess I'm
Rita?
going to take that one. You're right, this year is a phenomenal election year. I think we have 70 or 80 elections around the world, and we are very, very focused on a few things. One is a lot of people using our services to get information on where to vote, how to vote, like practical information, which really helps people to participate. Second, as you pointed out, there are a lot of concerns around disinformation, misinformation, which for years and years Google have been very focused on, and we're monitoring really closely of what the latest technology means and how we can get ahead of it. And I talked about cybersecurity at the very beginning. For years now, we have seen politicians running for election being specifically targeted for all sorts of reasons. So we have a special program which is an advanced security protection that is really designed for individuals who have a heightened security need. So a combination of helping people get the information they need to participate, because ultimately that's the biggest point of all these elections, making sure that we're very focused on the disinformation, misinformation side, and the cybersecurity side is how we're approaching it.
Excellent. Anyone else on this topic?
Yeah, we were joking about it in the team. When will we see, made in Germany, made in Korea and all that? When will we see a decent, trustful stamp says made in AI? With all the wonderful things that comes with it. And I would like to see that transparency. It's obviously a hard nut to crack. But I think being that kind of as honest as we can be about the content, the messages we have out there, at least in Europe, at least in these confined areas, because globally that it's a nightmare to manage, or at least in your country, in your region, when you elect, try to be very careful that this messaging is supported by AI in some way. And here's 3 or 17 ways you can check the alternatives to that messaging. Here's a message by a human, and that human has these and these biases and so on. I would like to have a little ticker on every TV channel out there saying, yeah, this is probably 69% right. That would be my dream of the future. Maybe not for this year's election, which was your question, but the future elections to come.
Maybe briefly, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think, judging from the last election in Poland, and without going into politics, I think the huge turnout that we had, unprecedented, the biggest turnout, the biggest since the communist time, kind of shows how much technology can actually create a positive outcome. And I think people are excited about it. And I think we were fairly well protected somehow from the misinformation that happened throughout the election time. So I'm, based on this kind of small, fairly recent example, I'm actually quite optimistic. But obviously, there's a lot of risks, like we discussed.
May I add one more thing there? Dear politicians, you will be in the center of this stage. Please educate yourself. Who mentioned that before? It's your job. Don't go on stage and make shit up. Bring an expert, bring a scientist, bring a philosopher, bring a behavior and social scientist on that stage that you otherwise do not combine your efforts to win with. But do that. And don't politicize their opinions. Make them a platform for your opinions so people can judge themselves. It's time for politicians to switch to become philosophers, designers of the future, and actually active participators to connect the community of experts rather than make your own expertise up and try to message it out to the world.
I guess you encapsulated the difference between a politician and a statesman
Maybe.
in a digital era very, very well. Now, the second role. The floor is yours.
Okay, I will ask you. So you are...
Oh, yeah.
Can you please introduce yourself first?
Right.
Thank you.
I'm Monika Rajska from Colliers. I heard last week on a panel discussion that actually we, as you mentioned and confirmed, we have a very great and fantastic talent pool. But also what I heard that, the increasing of the salaries and also compensations in the region, this actually causes that we are not more attractive for some foreign investors. And also what I heard that our national companies like Polish, Romanian, and Czech, they are actually not, they are far away with the implement of the digital transformations, which is mean that in the long term, we are going as a region somehow losing opportunities for the new investment. So I would like to hear from your side, what is the reason that actually national companies are not such a quick, with the transformation, digitalization, but as well, how we can be more attractive, for the potential investors?
I think that's an excellent question, especially in the light of tens of billions of dollars in subsidies that are given out to foreign investors by countries like Germany and other European counterparts. So how do we remain competitive, and how can we supercharge the digital transition of our national champions? Very briefly.
I can go, but that might be from my perspective, my job as a futurist or strategic foresight perspective. I think many of the big players, incumbents, including SAP, but everybody else as well, we are investing heavily in strategic foresight, long-term innovation thinking, futurism, if you wish, because that helps us to play the roadmap out to the uncertain areas. And if we do and get comfortable with the questions that you just asked, hey, how? What is happening? we will not default back on the next 3 quarters and reacting to any AI act or any move by OpenAIs out there in the world, whoever they might come from. We will be our own innovation pool of ideas because we are confident in the foresight we have. We do not have foresight. Look at the Middle East. A very difficult political system for us Europeans to understand, some of us, but very lucrative and very fast-moving innovation ecosystem. There's a lot to learn from that, how we can move faster if you have the 10, the 20, the 30 years outlook that, for example, the Asian community have, also with a different business philosophy, if I may suggest, and also political philosophy. If we can learn a little bit from that, we will be more comfortable in having the difficult long-term discussions to translate to our tactical moves in the next 3 months. Today, we focus only on the latter.
I think that's a great point. I think oftentimes I hear from politicians in the region, we want to be as good as Germany. I would like to hear them say, we want to be the best. And this is, I would say, sometimes the lack of ambition that we need to bridge. Wiktor, please.
Whenever I hear about those statistics and I hear about them a lot, I feel a little bit uneasy because for me there's a huge contrast, coming from this data compared to what I experience as a citizen living in Poland specifically, where I feel like the digitalization of both the government, public, the basic consumer experiences, things like renting a car, getting groceries, all this stuff is, coming here even to Switzerland. I feel like we're living the future a little bit, and then it comes to this, the companies in Poland not being as, or in the region not being as digitalized. I see this contrast, and I don't know exactly where is it coming from. My kind of hypothesis there is maybe there's a little bit of a challenge where we think about companies who are very successful locally, but they're not able to go into more of a regional, global context and be successful there. Because whenever I see companies, especially there's a bunch of examples again in Poland, like there's InPost, there's a bunch of companies who are, I think, leading the way globally in the experience for the consumer, but most of them are still very much on the local market. So maybe that's where the statistics are kind of going different directions, but I'm actually more optimistic about where we are and how can we build on that and kind of create kind of global champions, not only local.
That sounds great. Rita, maybe any thoughts on this
maybe
one?
just to zoom out at a European level, at the end, in the last quarter of last year, there were a bunch of reports, for example, from Business Europe, that compared foreign direct investments in Europe and US and said there are 2/3 decrease of foreign direct investments in Europe, while 2/3 increase in the United States. There were others, I think it was the Nordic countries, who sent a letter raising concerns about productivity of companies being 40% lower in Europe than comparing it to America. I'm based in Washington, D.C., so I'm following closely the transatlantic dynamics. So I think if the overall competitiveness of Europe is not as dynamic as we would like it to be, it inevitably has an impact on this region as well.
Great point. Thank you, Rita. We have time for one quick question.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Great panel. Thanks so much, everyone. Mateusz Leta-Cyrankiewicz, FutureWorks. This will be a futurist question. How far are we from someone with a group or a little swarm of agents outcompeting regular, kind of, let's call them legacy business structures?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How far are we from someone using a bunch of agents, self-guided agents, from outcompeting regular businesses?
If I understand your maybe worry correctly, we could have AI bots outcompeting people and people organizations in businesses, for example, by doing better business than they can do. Okay, for me, that's the human ingenuity and machine intelligence in symbiosis. And I think Europe could be the cradle for that. Because if you look at US, that moving so fast, back to your question and the answer you gave there, that very nice plane to discuss on. And we're looking at the Asian opportunistic drive forward, but with the long term, like we have a philosophy forward, but we act now for the money. Europe could act long term, but translated to immediate safety in the citizens' digital citizenship and security and safety there. I think combining those powers is important now, because if we don't do it now, 5 years from now, the danger you described might become truth. I think giving people that ability to check who they are interacting with is important, and that's what I call autonomy. Automation, how wonderful ever it is, speaking from SAP side, is not always the end of your business. Business is made by people. None business have ever been made by a transaction or an algorithm, in a sense. Business is made by, should we go into a mutual trust with our own money together? Yes, then press the button. And to augment people to how we interact with who are you, who am I, how many bots will you use? How transparently can I look into your algorithms or my algorithm into yours? And then we take a decision, and reserving that decision to humans, executive humans, so they can be creative about those decisions. Discuss them with subjective human opinions rather than automated answers from ChatGPT will be the playfield for that kind of symbiosis. So I am very optimistic because we're in the beginning, but it might be a tipping point somewhere, and it's closer than we think. So I give it years to be solved, and I think Europe is the place to solve it.
Amazing. Rita,
I would just want to second that. I think the productivity gain of many of these tools are enormous. So for companies, we call internally dog fooding, as we testing the technology before we making it available to our customers and the rest of the world. So we've been using for a while, like, write me my first draft of the email. And, we all get in the hundreds of the emails every day. And, just the simple fact that the computer generates the first draft that you can just quickly edit, it makes you faster in the mundane type of tasks. Or translate me this document, and then I can read it through instead of going through the motion of translating it for myself. So for companies who are using these tools, and this is our objective as Google, to use AI to help people, save time to do what, is really strategic, or spend your time on what's really the most exciting part probably of your job, as opposed to, some of the mundane tasks that we can really kind of speed up and offload. So for those companies and individuals who will adapt to this, like with any kind of technology, will obviously going to be a big gain. While for those who much slower in the adoption, I mean, they're probably going to start to become a gap.
Maybe small philosophical spin on this. I think this scenario that you're describing, I can see it happening in value extraction. So things like high intensity trading, things where you can try to find a way to extract value from something that was already created. But I think it's super hard to find examples of those kind of situations happening where you kind of try to create value. And I think this might be a big distinction of where humans are involved. I think that there's bigger potential for value creation. I think the automation obviously sometimes can be very good at extracting value.
Now, let's finish this panel with me asking you to give a very short piece of advice to the young people of the 3Cs region in a sentence or two.
I guess as a Hungarian origin who lived around the world and now in the United States, I think there's so many opportunities out there. Be excited, learn how this works. There's so many tools to learn. Be curious, and I think the world is yours.
Amazing. Wiktor?
Maybe slightly similar, and also building on what we've said before. I think maybe the advice is actually do leave, go somewhere, spend some time outside of the region and learn and come back, maybe, and then be productive and be helpful to the community, but also expand for yourself.
Awesome. Martin?
Two Europeans, Marie Curie and Albert Einstein, were in their early 20s when they made their breakthroughs. So, yeah, it's possible. Don't take authority for granted. Respect authority in a certain way, but you are the author. of your own future. Many businesses forget that sometimes. They are judged by the past and they stuck in the past. You are the young people that will be the next Marie Curies with 2 Nobel Prizes, by the way. You have these opportunities to move around in a larger scale today than before. Take them. You are the author. We are not anymore. We are here to manage your authorship.
Amazing. Thank you so much to the wonderful panelists. Thank you so much to the great audience. What can I say? Let's continue to educate, innovate, create, and thrive, and let's stay positive about AI and everything else. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.